Let's get Daisy into the chat. Daisy is from Washington and is asking, is there a way to actually disprove dogmatic religions unlike deism? This is a fair question. Do you need any addition to that? Any clarification, Daisy?
I think that's pretty much it. It's like, is there a way that dogmatic religions can be disproved? Like I understand that deism can't really be disproved necessarily, but like, do you think that just take the example of like the God of the Bible. Is there a way that you can disprove that?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Which version of the God of the Bible? We can
That
just start
was
there,
the right question.
because there's multiple versions of that God. There's at least, now some people say 10,000. I'll go with what I can prove and say there's 1,000 different religions, all of which disagree on some fundamental point of dogma, and they all claim the Bible as their source. So which God of the Bible are you talking about? And yeah, just start there.
Well,
Right.
I was recently having a discussion with an Episcopalian, and I kept bringing things up, like, you know, how there's slavery in the Bible and like the problem of evil, and about the thing about the testing of women's virginity and how that's wrong. And they kept saying, oh, no, we don't believe that kind of thing. And we accept gay and trans people and stuff because we don't take the Bible literally in that way. And
Yeah, laws are not literal anymore.
What's that?
So if they're telling you that laws are not literal anymore, I think they're more confused than just about anybody. Like the most literal part of the Bible are the laws, right?
Right.
Well, let me give you. Can I give you some nuggets that you might want to take and use in the future? Because there's a couple things you can write down if you're trying to do some work on debunking the Jesus nonsense. I would start with a 2-for-1, which is show that the Bible contradicts itself and show that the contradictions come directly from Jesus. I think these are problematic for a lot of Christians. Once they see that Jesus can say things wrong, there's all kinds of problems that they can't reconcile. So, for example, if you go to Matthew 27 and then go down to verse 7, it talks about Jesus being betrayed for the 30 pieces of silver. But listen to what it says in 7 and 8. It says, after conferring together, they used them to buy the potter's field as a place to bury foreigners. For this reason, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah, and they took 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one on whom a price had been set, on whom some of the people of Israel had set a price. So the author right here of Matthew, referring to Jesus' betrayal, is just wrong. Jeremiah didn't say anything. He actually just quoted Zechariah. He quoted Zechariah and attributed it to Jeremiah, which was just all complete flub. He completely flubbed it. Jesus does the same thing in Matthew 23. With Matthew 23? Yeah, Matthew 23, let me grab it real quick. In verse 34, he talks about the wrong Zechariah. In verse 35, he talks about a Zechariah that was martyred. As is, upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. But that's not correct. That's the wrong Zechariah. In 2 Chronicles 24, where it records the death of that Zechariah, it's not actually the son of Berechiah. Did I say that right? Yeah, Berechiah. It's the son of Jehoiada. So, like, we've got lots of instances of the New Testament just completely flubbing the Old Testament. One of my other favorites is Jesus in Luke chapter 4 misapplies Isaiah 61 to himself. If you just read all the way to verse 4, it's clear that it didn't come true. He also misquotes other parts of the Old Testament, like he completely flubs in Matthew 22 what's happening in Psalm 110, because he can't read Hebrew. He's only reading the Greek. And so once you start pointing out the problems with Jesus himself, not even understanding what's in the Hebrew Bible, it's very difficult for them to come back from that, because they think even though the Bible could have an error in it, they wouldn't expect an error to be in Jesus's own words.
Right. Even if they were Episcopalians.
Right, because Episcopalians aren't always like inerrantists. Like there's Episcopalians that can hold to a biblical view that still contains like some errors. But once you start showing them problems with like, well, Jesus himself said things that just aren't true, now they've got some stuff to wrestle with. Now, my favorite topic, of course, and I would spend all day, every day talking about it, is just reading the prophecies that are supposedly applied to Jesus. If you go to the book of Matthew, just do the first 2 chapters. Go to those prophecies that are quoted and go back to the Old Testament where they're quoted from and read them in the original context. You can easily just demonstrate quite quickly that Jesus didn't fulfill them in the context they were given. Like Hosea 11:1 talks about the son coming out of Egypt, but that's preposterous. Hosea 11:1 is about the Israelites coming out of Egypt. Israel is God's firstborn. It's a quotation of Exodus 4, verse 22. So the reality is, once you start looking at how Jesus didn't fulfill a single prophecy, we got a lot of big problems here. Jesus doesn't know the Old Testament properly. The gospel authors don't even know what a prophecy is. And so, like, what are we supposed to believe about this Jesus character when the gospels clearly are lying about the Hebrew Bible? Why would we believe them on something as monumental as a guy like raising from the dead?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally. That is way better than anything I could have thought of like on the spot when I was talking to this person. It's just, it seemed so slippery where like anytime I would bring up something, they would say, oh, like, no, we don't believe it like that. We like have this new progressive interpretation. And I was just thinking like, well, you could probably, you couldn't really disprove a God exist like a prime mover or something like that. But like, I feel like, I've watched the show for a long time. I've watched other shows. Like I've been really, really uncomfortably reading the Bible lately to sort of like see what it said. And it's and the Quran as well. It's like a lot of the stuff is kind of hard to get through because it's in this, like the sentences are really difficult to, they're in this kind of language that just is not, it doesn't really make too much sense. When I'm sure you like, I know Justin, you have like a lot of knowledge on this, but like it's really hard to read the Bible and come away with some kind of good interpretation that you think like that you've got it, like you've actually understood the sentence and that kind of thing. But
it certainly can be difficult, if you're not used to it.
Yeah. Just one other thing. Like, do you think that there's like, do you know much about like other religions? Do you think that there's like in the Quran or like in Buddhism or anything like that? Do you think that there's those same types of things, like these contradictions that can kind of show that the dogma is like it could be shown to be wrong?
Yeah. I think Jim's got some stuff to say about this as well, but like in Islam, there's like clearly things that are untrue. It says that Muhammad split the moon in 2. That's in the Hadith. Clearly didn't happen. We also have like preposterous stuff. Like it talks about how sperm in the Quran comes from between the backbone and the ribs. It doesn't. It gets embryology wrong, the order of development of the embryo. And then there's like really nonsensical passages that are just like wrong and sexist. Like in the Quran, 282 says, in regards to doing a financial contract, if there are not 2 men available to serve as witnesses, then a man and 2 women, such as you agree, for witnesses, so that if one of them errs, the other can remind her. So there's this baked in idea that like women are insufficient compared to men mentally. And if you read the Hadiths, the hadiths and the tafsir, they say the same thing. So in one hadith, Sahih Bukhari, it says, this is because of the deficiency of a woman's mind. They're baked into this religion is that women are deficient. They're less than men, especially in terms of memory. The funny thing is we've done like actual scientific studies, and it turns out women have superb memories, much better than men. So this idea that that women can't serve as good witnesses because their mind is deficient because they could remember something wrong is asinine.
That's wild.
Have you heard of street epistemology?
Yeah.
That's a really good technique for finding out, basically asking, how do you know that, ad nauseum without sounding like a 3-year-old. But that's basically what a lot of it is asking questions. So you don't have to know a lot about Hinduism or Buddhism or anything else to ask questions about it. And to be able to ask questions in such a way that you're actually trying to discover how they know that, why do they believe that? What's the root cause? What's the evidence do they have? And there's a lot of really good stuff out there. Anthony Magnabosca is probably one of the better ones out there. And he's a real good guy. I've met him a couple of times. But, the website's a good place. On Street Epistemology is a good place to get started with that. You don't have to know everything to help people to discover the truth. You just have to be willing to ask good questions, listen to the answers so that you can generate more good questions. And that's the best way to go about doing that. And that's for every religion, right? Or even you prefer Superman over Batman. You can use street epistemology to figure out why somebody likes Superman more than Batman. So it's not just religious questions. It's any particular point of knowledge that somebody may know more than you do. And people know more about their own beliefs than most people. But if you watch enough Anthony Magnabosca and enough street epistemology folks, you'll be able to pick up the rhythm and figure out how to ask those questions while listening, just for your own edification, because somebody could actually have a good reason. That's why we do this show. Although today I'm doing this show just to see if we can get theists to answer the questions, yes or no questions with yes or no, but we haven't had any theists yet today. So that may have scared them off with that.
Well, that does make a lot of sense. I'm trying to read the Bible and the Quran and some other stuff in order to be better at addressing some of the conversations, but I see how street epistemology could be the difficulty that I have is that I think that a lot of theists will sort of cling on to belief just sort of without good reasons for it. They'll just it's just because their family, their little town or whatever is all this kind of way, and so that it's just sort of this they're very they just sort of believe it because they believe it.
Yeah, and that's very much the case. And asking the right questions can do more to expose that. The type of debate that Justin and I do on this show, and everyone else does on the ACA shows, and others as well, often runs into the backfire effect. We know that that's going to happen. The more you directly oppose someone's ideas, the more strongly entrenched they can become, which is why we say we don't do these shows necessarily to win the argument with the caller. It's the people who are listening, and that happens a lot more than a caller going, "Oh yeah, you're right, I no longer believe." So in street epistemology is a way around that, because you're not opposing someone's ideas, you're exploring their ideas. And you're doing it in a very non-confrontational way. But even so, it's not going to be one conversation. It may be dozens of conversations, and it may not be the conversation with you. Maybe it's the conversation with you that gets them listening to this show. And then it's a conversation that they listen to that actually convinces them. It's not a one and done process, and it's not a short process. Ask anybody who's deconverted. It takes a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was lucky because I was never really forced into Christianity. Like, my family was Christian. They were Presbyterians, but my family basically just didn't care what I believed. And when I was like 12, I actually I emailed the ACA to try to determine if I was agnostic or atheist or both or that kind of thing. And they really helped me through that. But honestly, this has been really helpful. And Justin and Jim, I'll look up both of the things that you recommended, and I really appreciate it. You're two of my heroes. So
sure thing, friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Best luck to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
I mean, interesting question. I do think personally, I think everyone has a different approach to tackling the religious topics. And I think personally, I've always favored the debunking the book. But, there's a lot of people that don't have dogmatic views of the books. So debunking the book doesn't really do it for them. Like, you have to start with philosophy.
Yeah. Catholics are not strict interpretation. In fact, Bible only is a heresy to the stricter Catholics, because the Bible was not written as Christianity for dummies. They see it as a different book, but they also don't take it literally. The question then becomes, well, what do you take literally and what don't you take literally, and how you decide what you do, right? Which do you take literally and which don't? Like, Catholics don't take Genesis as being factually true. So how do you decide what is and isn't true, right? If Genesis isn't true, then how do you get to the resurrection, right? If the flood isn't true, how do you get to the resurrection? And so they take that as fable and myth, and there's some truths there, but not, it's not literally word for word true. And I think your style works better with a lot of evangelicals who are Bible only, every word is true type folk. So yeah, it is harder. But even with Catholicism, there's stuff you can get into that just, where does this come from? Where does papal infallibility come from? But first, sometimes you got to get a Catholic to figure out what that is and how the church defines it, because no two Catholics believe the same thing on that. And Italian Catholics don't believe the same thing as German Catholics. American Catholics are a whole different beast. So, yeah.
Quite true.